Hi. Ethiopia's government has arrested over 4,000 people in the Amhara region in an effort to regain control of a fast fracturing country. Those detained are militia members, politicians, journalists, and military leaders. The move is seen as an effort to nip in the bud the growing nationalist movement in the Amhara region. This is happening while the war with the Tigray region is ongoing. The government in Addis Ababa is also restricting gun ownership to reduce the growing number of armed groups in Amhara that are inflaming ethnic tensions and adding to an already turbulent situation in the country. One of such armed youth groups, the FANO, has been accused of human rights violation in their involvement on behalf of the Ethiopian central government in the conflict with Tigray. Reacting to the crackdown, the people of Amhara have been on the streets protesting, especially against the detention of Tefara Mamo, an Amhara general detained for criticizing the Ethiopian prime minister in a TV interview. There have been reports of multiple clashes with police, some resulting in deaths. In the Oromia region, insurgencies and intercommunal clashes are on the rise. Ironically, Ethiopia is breaking at the seams under the leadership of a Nobel Peace Prize winning Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. In Nigeria, the main opposition party, the People's Democratic Party (PDP), yesterday elected a former Vice President Atiku Abubakar to lead the party into next year's general elections. Mr. Abubakar defeated Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike and former Senate President Bukola Saraki, among others, to win the primaries. Atiku Abubakar polled 371 votes to beat 13 other candidates. There were widespread accusations of vote buying at the convention. In the last presidential election in 2019, Mr. Atiku Abubakar ran against current President Muhammadu Buhari and lost. While campaigning for another chance, Atiku promised to decentralize the Nigerian government if he wins in the February 2023 presidential election. His opponent in the election will be determined next week when the ruling All Progressive Congress (APC) elects its presidential candidate. The party moved its convention to June 6 and 7 after INEC extended the deadline for all parties to submit their candidates for office by 1 week. Whoever becomes Nigeria's president next year will confront a country with high debt, double-digit unemployment, and crippling insecurity across the country. I am Chido Onuma. It's 8:30 a.m. in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
I'm Rudolph Okonkwo. It's 11:30 a.m. in New York City.
It is 4:30 p.m. in Nigeria.
And it is 6:30 p.m. in Ethiopia. Wherever in the world you are joining us, welcome to another edition of 90 Minutes Africa. On our show today, we have Ayisha Osori, Director of the Open Society Foundations, and Samson Itodo, Executive Director of YIAGA Africa. They will help us understand what happened at the PDP's presidential primaries yesterday and what will happen at the APC's presidential primaries next week. Ayisha, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We are still waiting for Samson. Oh, is he here? No, he's not here yet. Okay, Samson will join us later. Ayisha, let's start by getting your view on what happened. What's the impression of the PDP's primaries yesterday?
Well, I mean, the entire week actually in Nigeria has been quite content-filled, as I call it, because these days I look at Nigeria for all the content that it provides. But specifically for the presidential primaries that happened yesterday in Abuja, I would say that I was actually surprised by the results. I guess I was so for different reasons. For one, I believed the hype that Wike would win the ticket. I mean, I'd heard a lot about how, of course, some of the party stalwarts were a bit fearful about what a Wike presidency would mean, But at the end of the day, I also didn't expect the margin between Atiku and whoever would win would be this high, this wide. So that was also amazing. I think despite what we know about how delegates are selected, despite what we know about what influences delegates, I think part of what we saw yesterday was actually a bit about what democracy could look like. I hope I'm not speaking too soon, but I think I saw at least a few things that weren't tied just to who paid who what, but just a sense of fairness. And I'll give one example. So for example, I understand that instead of having ballot boxes by state, all the 36 states plus FCT at the PDP primaries yesterday, they just had one major box. That's a game changer. And I know I'm speaking from experience. So what this does is it makes it really difficult for you to be able to say, here's who won or here's who voted. So for example, if Wike was expecting 100% of all the votes from Rivers, as he would be unable at the end of the day to say, oh, I only got 80% because, you count Rivers state ballots on its own, you count Zamfara on its own. That wasn't there. They put everything in one box and everybody had to just sort of, and then there was no phones. Nobody could have their phone there to take pictures and say, hey, here's proof of life. Give me the balance of what you promised me for voting for you. So in a way, we saw a bit of how democracy could work during the primaries.
Okay.
Samson, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Sorry for joining late, and it's great to see everyone, including the CEO herself.
All right.
Yeah, good to have you, Samson.
Yeah, nice to see you too, Samson.
Okay, Chido, go ahead.
Yes, welcome, Samson. Ayisha was just giving us her thoughts on the PDP primaries yesterday. What's your general overview of what happened?
Well, I think it's good to see that the parties are getting accustomed to well organized, well choreographed party primaries, unlike what we see at the subnational level. That's very disruptive, there's violence. It looks like for the presidential elections, the parties seem to have gotten their hearts together with respect to organization, with respect to logistics. 24 hours before the primaries, the venue of the primaries was well organized, with seats for delegates, with the ballot boxes and the cubicles. It was interesting to see that it appears the PDP produced its own ballot paper, ballot boxes and voting cubicles, because previously they would apply to INEC to request for those materials, and sometimes the materials get destroyed. So it's good to see that they've taken up that cost to produce those materials. So I think in terms of organization, I would say I'll give the party a pass mark. Um, in terms of participation and the delegates, what was quite unique about this particular set of primaries with respect to inclusion, there was effort to include persons with disability, women, and also young people as part of the delegates that voted at the primaries. So I'd say that yes, on that end, I think it was a positive development. We had thought that the PDP was going to reschedule its primaries following the sudden announcement of an extension to the timelines for the primaries. For good a thing, they didn't. They proceeded. I think it speaks to a resilient character of the parties that we must identify. But look at what actually happened and its outcome. Well, news went to town shortly before the voting commenced yesterday about this commercialization of the process and how much each candidate was procuring the delegates. Some say 20,000, some say $15,000. We don't have any evidence to substantiate that, but what we know, we just speaking with people, there was some trading that was done, and I don't think it was done at the venue of the primaries, because we see EFCC operatives from media reports visited the the, the the stadium, the venue of the primaries. I'm not aware of any arrests that was done. I'm not aware of any reports that they actually caught someone or cited anyone, exchanging money for votes. So it looks like, the politicians devise creative ways of buying and procuring the delegates before the elections. But on the whole, I'd say yes, it's come and it's gone, and the PDP has a candidate. And it appears the more popular candidate in this case has won. And they wait for the APC to conclude its primaries, and then the battle is drawn.
Thank you, Samson. Aisha, I wanted to find out from you. You said you were surprised at the outcome. Were you thinking that Wike could have defeated Atiku? And what is behind that thinking? Is it that the delegates who favor Wike in terms of, because if you look at the number of delegates and where they come from, I don't think Wike actually had any chance of defeating or someone from the north.
Well, I mean, you could be right. I mean, I guess I was taken up by, there's a lot of analysis going around, and I actually even saw, a few breakdowns by states with Wike winning. And of course, there's a lot of all that. Oh, Wike already has 19 states, or he has 20 states. So maybe it was part of that one that made me feel like, okay, maybe Wike was the favored. There was also second a sense that, people are tired of Atiku, so to speak, as the perennial candidate, and maybe they wanted somebody new. So there was that. And in addition to him being an old face, I think as long as we've had since 1999, he's gotten PDP's ticket except for 2007 when OBJ literally hounded him out of the party and then gave the ticket to Yardua. So he's always had the ticket. So I just felt maybe in the spirit of all the desire to have something new, that, Wike would also be a favored candidate. There was the age factor as well, which is not on Atiku's side. Which, okay, you could say would favor somebody like Saraki or Tambuwal, but then I was also looking at even though PDP refused to zone, there was also the zoning sentiments, the idea that, look, we've had 8 years, or we're going to, by 2023, have 8 years of a northerner, that it's time for a southerner. So I thought, okay, that would also favor Wike. Also, then I just thought the dollarization of the elections, we're seeing an increase. I mean, first of all, the Electoral Act increased the maximum that's allowed for campaigns. So we do know that there's an expected surge in spending around the elections for 2023. There's no doubt that Nigerians are more impoverished than they were in 2019 or 2015. The Naira has lost value. The rate of poverty has gone up. So for me, all those things, including the very high cost, I mean, all the parties also increased their nomination and expression of interest forms, with APC outstanding everybody with their 100 million, but PDP was second with 40 million. So again, as I said, there was a very clear sense for me, and still remains, that the elections are up for sale. And of course, thinking about how long Atiku has been out of power and what being out of power means to your pockets in Nigeria, Wike being the governor of the second richest state in Nigeria, all those things for me. But of course, there were other things that made sure that Wike didn't win, and I think I alluded to that. So yes, I was ready to be surprised. Let's put it that way. I didn't take it for granted that Atiku would emerge victorious. I knew that the rest didn't really have much of a chance, that it was really between those two, Wike and Atiku. But at the same time, as I said, I was open. But when it comes down to it, many factors played in Atiku's stead. One of them, which is just Wike, in a way, in my mind, just self-destructed. He's been very brash, very harsh, very antagonistic, arrogant, and all those things. So he must have put a lot of people off as well in the run-up to the elections. But as I said, Tambuwal stepping down for Atiku was also in Atiku's favor. I don't think anybody would have foreseen that. In my mind, Tambuwal has always been, we understand, Wike's friend. I think just before the primaries, people were sharing old pictures of Wike holding up his ballot, which I think was not allowed this time. But I think at the 29th, for the primaries for the 2019 PDP election, primaries for the president, Wike was holding up a ballot that showed that he had voted for Tambuwal. So there was this sense that, maybe Tambuwal, who was Atiku's fiercest rival for 2019, would side with his friend, and who knows, maybe be his vice president. So all those calculations for me made PDP in a way more exciting than APC. I mean, but now, of course, we're all eyes on APC to see what their response will be. It's been very clear that APC is waiting to see what PDP will do. And it's very clear that also they will be putting Atiku as the front runner into their considerations going forward. So I hope that explains. For me, I still see the 2023 elections as about cash. And I thought Wike has the treasury of the River State. Why not? Maybe he can buy his way through. And Nigerians, I feel like increasingly, especially those in the political class, have lost touch with the reality of Nigerians and just see election time as a time for them to cash out. Money reigns, and it's not even naira, it's dollars.
All right, let me show a video of Wike and kind of supporting what you are saying. This was when I knew that Wike will most likely not win the election. Watch.
Follow me now. Follow me. Let's go to the Eagle Square 28. As they give you the ballot pack, don't look anywhere. Wike. I don't know what you're saying. If someone touches you, you say, "Are you wicked?" Don't touch me if you're not wicked. If you say wicked, what did I say? Wicked. What did I say? Wicked. Did you hear me? Wicked. Say it again. Wicked.
That's Wike.
Wike, I'd like to wish you the very best in your primary.
No, I think you should congratulate me.
Not yet, because you have not been announced.
Nobody will win me in this election. Nobody will win me. They all know.
I wish you the very best.
No, congratulate me.
I can't do that.
As a candidate
I wish you the very
of
best.
PDP.
Well, that's how we are. Thank you
so that was very interesting, the dynamics. And then the withdrawal of Sokoto State governor and his support for Atiku. People said that was the overriding factor. Samson, do you think so?
Well, I was actually thinking so, but I saw a video yesterday that was quite concerning about a video of delegates from Sokoto State who were pledging support for Atiku and urging the leadership of the PDP to refrain from making a mistake by supporting Tambawal's aspiration. And you can see from that video that he actually does not have the support of his base. And for a politician, a governor of a state who was vying for presidency, to lose in the primaries, he thought, I think the best action he could take at that moment to save his reputation, because I think, and this is just my view, he wasn't particularly interested in taking that action, in my view. I think he just looked and he read the room, and to prevent any form of political embarrassment, he just chose to withdraw from the race. And of course, being who he is and being a politician, who is the closest that you can endorse that will not, bring any sort of political consequence to you coming from your region. And the best person he could adopt was Atiku. I am not disregarding any sort of negotiation that must have happened or any reach out from the Atiku's camp, but I think it's a combination of several factors. And I personally, with the way the vote went, I think whether he withdrew or he didn't withdraw, or he didn't withdraw from the race, the Soto delegates knew where they were going to vote. We've not seen the distribution of the votes, and quite frankly, we can't really say because the ballot papers were not marked with states or so. But I think that there were still people from Sokoto who could have voted for him, but I don't think he controlled majority of the delegates from Sokoto State. And also keep in mind that before the primaries, Atiku had done a lot of campaign and outreach to delegates in the northern parts of the country and the southern parts of the country. And given that he's an old horse and he's been in this race before, he could still have won. And why I also think that it was just an attempt to save his political future. Recall during his elections, he actually won by a slim margin in 2019, because the margin of lead between Tambawal and the APC candidate in Sokoto was very slim. So you still see someone who, even within his base, he hasn't consolidated his power and his dominance of Sokoto politics. So like it's a combination of several factors.
Okay, let me play a little bit of that video for our viewers who may not have seen it, and then we'll continue our conversation. This is from Sokoto.
I'm Alhaji Gobirawa, an elder in Sokoto South Local Government of Sokoto State. Thank you for giving me a chance to say something. I want to use this opportunity to request from our great elders of our great party, PDP, across nationwide, particularly in our dear Sokoto State, to enlarge their thinking deeply by resisting their hands from backing Governor Aminu Tambol's ambitions to the office of the president. It is clearly known that a person that unable to deliver his primary responsibilities at state level, it is incompetent for him to take over the mental leadership of the whole nation.
All right, that was the video. It says a lot about what probably is going on. Chido, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Rudolph. Before we get to the APC, what's going to happen, likely to happen in APC next week, still on PDP, both of you, Samson and Ayisha, you talked about some glimmer of hope based on what happened at the national level in terms of the primaries. But the reports we got from the states are nowhere close to what happened at the national level. How do we reconcile that? And it's within the same party where there was crisis everywhere you turn to, both senatorial and gubernatorial races. Is there any explanation for this? Ayisha, you can.
Okay, I mean, sure, I'm happy to go. And I think in listening to Samson, I was actually already thinking about that, because when he talked about the fact that Atiku had campaigned in the North vigorously, I couldn't help thinking, but he was campaigning to statutory delegates, because it was only about a week ago that we knew that, Buhari wasn't going to sign the amendment to the Electoral Act to make sure that Section 84.8 included statutory delegates. And largely, my understanding is that the ad hoc delegates are usually unknown. Even with this election, these primaries, we did hear stories of people hiding delegates, which is a normal process. So I would say, Chido, the answer to your question lies in there. One of the reasons why it was so messy in the States and different for national is that the delegates were different. My understanding is that they had delegates who were going to vote separately for the gubernatorial and national assembly, delegates who were going to vote separately for the presidential. So for example, for the presidential, they just had 774 people, one from each local government. It was a different set of delegates that were voting on other things, and that could explain why it was a lot more messy. And so for me, when you think about how delegates are selected, therein lies the beginning of the problem. First of all, I consider that most political parties do not really know who their members are. No party today, not even PDP that has remained as it is since 1999, plus of APC that was only formed in 2014, have an auditable that can beat their chest and say, hey, KPMG, come and audit our members list. They can't do that. None of them keeps a member list that's verifiable and auditable. So from where do these delegates come from? So usually these delegates are unknowable quantities of people. I heard so many stories, even in this election, of people just basically writing the delegates list and keeping it aside, waiting for some sort of other verification process to happen. What triggered Obi to move from PDP to APC was allegedly again about the delegates and who controls them, and the sense that Wike had somehow connived with the Ubas in Anambra to hand over the structures of the party. So when we talk about the delegate system, the dominance, again, I couldn't help but smile a little at that use of that word dominance in politics. It's wrong. There's this sense that the way to win elections in Nigeria is to control in a way that's completely anti-democratic. You want to pick the delegates, you literally handpick the delegates. In my experience in 2014, we had a mix of statutory when I was contesting the PDP primary. So I'm speaking from my personal experience. When we had the PDP delegates, we still had statutory and ad hoc at that time. So, of course, most of our engagement was with the statutory delegates. I only knew confirmed. There was rumors about who the ad hoc delegates were going to be. The list was only confirmed the day before the primaries. So you had to do a mad scramble to sort of check the list and make sure that nobody had changed overnight. In my case, 2 had changed. I had to go find them and engage them, so to speak. So those are all the things that I think made the primaries really, different in the States. And then there was also just a sense that there were lots of upsets, which I thought was good. I found it remarkable that people like Abaribe and Ekweremadu, who had held onto PDP tickets in different roles for 16 years in the case of Abaribe, 20 years in the case of Ekweremadu, would lose. But in a way, it's like, okay, great. There are many upsets. We need to do the analysis to find out what the upsets were.
Okay, Samson, thank you so much, Ayisha.
Well, I think what happened in the state is just a reflection of the Nigerian state. That one, the states are so weak that they can't control their affairs. They can't deliver on the basic delivery of public goods, even though, yes, at the center you have a lot of powers, but the center is also weak as well. But once you decentralize, once you devolve, the quality, the accountability diminishes. And so what you see in the States is the fact that, one, process-wise, a lot of the leaders within the parties and the contenders and the key actors hijacked the entire process within the parties. And people, were resilient, and they pushed against all the attempts to subvert the process. Look at what happened in Anambra. For a lot of states as we speak, they've not conducted their primaries. Some are conducting their primaries today because of the controversies around the delegate list. The second issue was also insecurity. There are some states that some parties couldn't conduct primaries in some states in the south, southeast, and other parts of the country. So again, that's another issue. The third issue for me was the role that the leadership of the party actually plays, the National Working Committee. And at a point, you think there's cohesion within the national working parties of the 2 major political parties. But you can see what's happening with the APC as well as the PDP. In cases where candidates emerge out of primaries that were monitored by INEC, we found that some results from other parallel primaries were accepted by the National Working Committee. A case in point is Banky W's case, where Banky W participated in a primaries, won, he got 23 votes, videos to show, and that primary was monitored. That was a primary that was monitored by INEC. So it's the recognized primary for that particular constituency. But what happened, days later, a different result made it into the public, and now he's had to grapple with submitting appeals within the party and hoping that the party's leadership will adopt the report, INEC's report, from the primaries that it monitored. If you check, even from an INEC point of view, and just speaking with INEC officials, there are several reports from candidates who were unlawfully substituted of INEC's certified true copies of their reports for the monitoring that was conducted across the state. So it's not the presidential primaries, it's the governorship primaries, it's the National Assembly, and as well as state primaries. And some processes were severely compromised at the state level because people thought that there was no attention with what's happening at the state, and so they could get away with any form of irregularity. But it's good to and really heartwarming to see that people are actually rising up and they are claiming their rights, and we should, support them to get justice in the course of this electoral journey.
All right. Thank you so much, Samson. Ayisha, let me come back to you. You mentioned Ekweremadu and Abaribe. They actually left PDP. They did not contest. They didn't have any pathway to getting that nomination. But now people have moved on, and even talking about who will be the vice presidential candidate of Atiku, or the path that Atiku will take to getting the winning the election next year. What do you think? Being that it's not likely that Atiku will pick Wike as his vice, because Wike will outshine him. It's not likely that now that the PDP is almost in disarray in the southeast, what do you think Atiku will do?
Oh, fantastic question. Well, just to say that, to touch a little bit on Ekweremadu and Abaribe, it's healthy for our democracy when people stay in parties for a long time and don't cross paths. So for me, those two, after being such loyal PDP members in a way that we don't see in our democracy, especially in the Fourth Republic, for them to feel like they needed to leave the party to achieve their ambition, I think that's a bad thing for at least some aspects of our democracy. And so it's important for us to also be looking at why party stalwarts will be leaving their party after 20 years, 16 years, because they don't see a pathway. There's something wrong going on, and it's worth examining. On the issue of Wike not being Atiku's candidate, again, maybe here is me just being a little Pollyanna and idealist, but I don't see that that's cancelled. Until I hear the announcement, I think everything is on the table. I wouldn't rule out a Wike. It would make really practical sense for Atiku in a very pragmatic way, cynical also in a way, to pick Wike. In terms of Wike outshining Atiku, I don't think so. I think somehow there's something about our vice presidential position, which hasn't changed since the days of Obiji and Atiku, that it's designed for containment. So Wike will be contained if he becomes a vice president, just like all vice presidents are contained. Now, I would think, unfortunately, and I don't know, again, also, maybe this is me also being idealistic, is it completely out of the question for Peter Obi to also come back and be, I don't know. I don't know, but for me, that would be a more ideal ticket. I know that when it was the ticket in 2019, there was a lot of internal issues within the party, within people in the Southeast who felt they weren't consulted before Peter Obi was chosen. But I would still think that one way to douse some of the pain, of course, from members of the PDP, especially from the Southeast, who feel hard done by the fact that they've been loyal to PDP since 1999, well, give or take APGA. And so maybe that would also be an opportunity. But so there's Ekweremadu, maybe he'll be an ideal person to match with Atiku. I'm sure that if we put together a list of like 10 Southeasterners, we could come up with a few fairly decent possibilities. My only hesitancy is that because governors have become really powerful emperors in our elections, they are seen as the ones who deliver, so to speak, the presidency. And I keep saying to people who want to deepen our democracy that we need to look at how we split our elections into two. I would favor blending. We should have our elections all on one day. I don't buy the argument that it's too much for the electorate to take, because I think there's a rigging formula in having the president first and the governors after. Because what it says to me is that the governors deliver the president and then they can do whatever they like in their own states. So I would also be hesitant, and I would be worried if Atiku picked someone who was not a governor. I don't know what the permutations would be, but those are some of the things I would look at. It would be too early for me to say this or that, but I would say don't rule Wike out as a possible vice presidential candidate.
All right, thank you.
Let me ask Ayisha, in your own review of what's possible, looking at the two parties, why, without mentioning names, what would you say, or what would be your preference in terms of where he picks the vice presidential candidate from? I'm talking about Atiku now.
You mean in terms of the zones?
The balance of forces and
the balance of forces.
Yes, prospects.
Even trying to think of who is a PDP governor from the Southeast right now. Is there any?
I'm not even talking. Let's not look at specifics in terms of both from the South. So sure. He would have most likely a Christian vice president from the
Oh,
south.
completely. No, of course.
So
He would definitely have
which of the three zones do you think, you just going
It would
into
be,
his head?
I would say southwest, southeast. I would think it's not likely to be southwest for all the reasons why it's unlikely for APC's presidential candidate to be from the southwest. There's a very strong sense across board that the southwest have done well from 1999 to date. 8 years of Obasanjo and 8 years of OBJ, and 8 years of what's his name? Oh, sorry, well, 4 years of the speakership, if you count Dimeji. So people are not feeling the southwest. I think Atiku will look to the south, and to the southeast for his vice president. Yes, Christian. Yes, male, and yes, from the south.
So,
yeah.
Thank you, Samson. Quickly, the other big news apart from the PDP primaries, and you've been involved with election monitoring and critiquing election bodies across the continent. The other big news from the week was the extension granted by INEC. Was it necessary? Why was that? Why was it necessary? And how is there fear that maybe February next year we could see an extension if they can do this at the very last minute?
So let's talk about what we know. One, we know that the commission was put under pressure to shift the date.
By?
I would say by the ruling party, or as well as other political parties. We know that for sure. We know that. Secondly, we know that, this extension, by the expiration of this extension, some parties will still not be ready to conduct or nominate their candidates. We know that for sure. The third thing we know is that given this extension, we know political parties and even the incumbents may also demand an extension down the line. And this is problematic for our electoral process. Now, let's be very clear that I am not anti-extension, that yes, INEC as an institution should create an enabling environment where political parties, can perform their roles, right? But it's just inexplainable that an act that was signed into law in February 25th, and INEC released the timetable and schedule for the elections on the 28th, on the 26th, thereabouts, yes, of February. The parties had 60 days to prepare for the primaries. How come they weren't ready? Why did they all fix their primaries at the last week when the deadline of the primaries was meant to be concluded? And all this is just the crisis of the ruling party. When there's an absence of leadership in a governing party, the spillover effect that it has on institutions, on citizens, on national security is quite high. The APC is unable to nominate a candidate. Just check, they've not conducted screening of presidential aspirants. So imagine you are a presidential aspirant in the APC. They've been shifting the goalpost. Every other party, at least most of the parties, have screened their presidential aspirants, but no one has any information about when they will be screened. And that is disturbing. And just look at the letter that Salih Lukman wrote about the conduct of the affairs and how the chairman of the APC has been managing the affairs of the party. For heaven's sake, how can you be a chairman of a governing party and you are inaccessible, and every time you're asked questions, you're waiting for the president, you claim to be waiting for the president, who is the national leader of the party. But the president has, through his body language, shown that he's unable to manage crisis. Because if he can manage crisis, in my view, he's struggling. He doesn't have the confidence to tell certain people who have indicated interest to vie for office that I am not going to support you. I don't think you guys are worthy successors. And so this is who I am nominating as my candidate and as my successor. Secondly, the issue about the procedure Everything the APC is doing as we speak is just building and laying the foundation for consensus. Recall that the president was the person who introduced consensus into the Electoral Act. And so I don't think the party wants to conduct any primaries, to be honest. I think the party just wants to adopt a sole candidate for the presidential elections. And if they do so without conformity to the provisions of the law, without building consensus in the true sense of the word, then I suspect that there might be an implosion very soon within the party. And the party does have an opportunity to put its hearts together, because if it doesn't, it will continue to mount pressure on the Electoral Commission. It will continue to mount pressure on security agencies. And rather than protect the fidelity of the Constitution, they will be pandering to the whims and caprices of political actors. And all this happened at the detriment of our public interest. And so I think that the party has about 6 days. It may not have shifted the timetable and schedule of activities, but I think that INEC needs to do a lot more to protect its independence and not yield to the pressure by political actors. Because the moment you show that you can shift your position on these issues, politicians are going to take you for a ride.
Okay, thank you so much, Samson. Now that we've gone into discussion on APC, Ayisha, let me ask you: the emergence of Tinubu of Atiku, does it have anything to do with what will happen in APC? Does that change what APC, the people who are power behind the power, what they are likely going to do?
Well, I think absolutely. My sense is that the reason why APC has been dallying about who their presidential candidate is going to be is because they wanted to see who would emerge from the PDP. So no doubt the emergence of Atiku yesterday as the PDP candidate is going to have different permutations within the aspirants and within those who think they control the party and can decide who the president is going to be. So, for example, I do agree that it's very unlikely that there might be primaries. Maybe they just want to be able to announce. And my understanding is that APC has already shifted when their presidential primaries are going to be, and they put it for very strange. They put it for between the 6th and the 8th, considering that the deadline is the 9th. So anybody who is being suspicious would say they want to leave it to the very last minute, so that it's impossible for members to go to court or anything before the deadline. It's just like, oh, boom, you announce it on the 8th and the deadline is the 9th. And so it sort of restricts what the reaction should be. So that's another clue that whoever emerges is most likely going to be really controversial within the party itself. Now, so initially when APCs launched we opened the sales of their forms, we could see that there was a sort of pattern. It was mostly Southerners who were buying the tickets, apart from the odd people like Yaya Bello, who we know is not even really in the calculations. I hope he gets 0 votes if they ever get to voting. But anyway, apart from oddballs like Yaya Bello, mostly the serious contenders were from the South. Then all of a sudden, we started seeing a few Northerners, the Senate President Lawan, I think Badaru of Jigawa, and maybe Yerima, I think. Those are the ones. So why did we suddenly see Northerners come out? Because there was also this sense that, oh, okay, if PDP, who had made it clear already controversially that they weren't going to zone, so people started thinking, if PDP picked a Northerner, we would be stupid in APC. That's thinking of some people, not to also pick a Northerner, because then, in a way, we've given PDP the election. So there's this sense that, Nigerians, there's this myth that, the North will always win the elections. And so if you have a Northerner, which doesn't show, we voted for Obasanjo, we voted for Jonathan. So there's no reason to think that merely having a Northerner on your ticket means you're going to win the elections. But somehow there's that thinking that, okay, if PDP feels Atiku, let's have a Lawan, so to speak. Lawan himself is looking at it and saying, maybe I just might be favorable. Let's match Northeast to Northeast. There are other people who are saying that, okay, with Atiku coming out, maybe Jonathan, the dark horse, who is still a rumor, not sure whether he's going to run or not, hasn't said by himself that he's going to run. But for those who are pushing his candidacy, there's this sense that, okay, in addition to the fact that he will not be able to run more than one term, maybe a Jonathan who beat Atiku before is looking really good for this. So completely. I do think that yesterday, and maybe who knows, the cynic in me, and I really hope PDP keeps his lips shut about this. PDP should probably not announce who their vice president is going to be until they know who the APC presidential candidate is also going to be. Because the cynic in me would also be saying that APC will want to see even that before they go ahead with their own calculations.
It's interesting. You mentioned former President Goodluck Jonathan. I looked out for him at the PDP primaries. I don't know if we can confirm that he wasn't there. Samson, I'm sure you monitored. Do we know if he was there or not?
Won't you be shocked and surprised if you find former President Jonathan at the PDP primaries? He wasn't there at the convention where the leaders were elected. He's not been attending meetings, so you'll be shocked to find him there. I think somewhere he's still in the calculation.
For the APC.
For the APC, and I think based on reports and conversations. I think the condition that he has given is to be coronated as the sole candidate of the APC. That's the condition that we understand he has given those who are disposed to his candidacy. And some people think that all of the horse trading and sort of political activities going on in the APC is just geared towards creating that atmosphere and preparing the ground for a coronation in that sense. And I would say that, to be honest, you should, even as a candidate and who claims to represent and promote democratic values, should be concerned about how that decision to adopt you as the sole candidate is reached. If it's not in line with certain democratic principles.
Yeah, particularly, not to cut you short, I don't know if you saw the video where he came out and criticized the delegates process and so on. So I'm looking at that and also thinking of what your comments now in terms of...
Yeah, but I don't even agree with him. On some of the comments that he made, it was just unlike him. There was something about that appearance. And he was very critical, and he talked about Section 84. And I was wondering, which sections was he referring to? Was he referring to 84 sub 12, or he was referring to 84 sub 4? I wasn't particularly clear about what he was saying, but to have berated the National Assembly in the manner that he did was really begs to question. I think there's something that we don't know. Something may have inspired that position that he took. So maybe, honestly, I can't say, but with his tone, let's assume, just on the face value, that he was defending some democratic values, even though that's debatable. But I don't think that condition we believe that he has given, he should be interested in how that decision is reached. But quite frankly, I don't also agree with the ruling of the Federal High Court that he is eligible to run, because he has taken the oath he's been sworn into office twice. He's taken the oath twice. And I hope that the litigants in that particular case will appeal the judgment and ensure its finality at the Supreme Court. I hope that is done, because I don't believe that President Jonathan is qualified to run again based on the provisions of the Constitution. And in any case, honestly, we need new actors in our political process. We need new faces. We are tired of these old and expired politicians. They should retire, go back home, and live with their grandchildren. And please leave the space for new actors who have fresh ideas, who can repair and fix this country. And you know what's very sad? If you check all the conversations, no one is speaking about policy issues, about how they fix the economy. There are no fresh ideas. And you listen to some of these aspirants and you just wonder, do they live in a different world than the same world that we're living? Can't they see that we are such a broken country? We're so polarized. The economy is bad. And the only way to get out of this mess is through innovative, transformative leadership that they don't even have, and they're not even qualified to provide. And this is, my grouse with the parties, that why do they continually field, this old and expired politician? I call them expired because in their policy conversations, you don't see any fresh ideas. Look at their policy documents and their manifestos. You still want to use the same approach, the same methodology that you used 10, 20 years ago to fix our current challenges. No, it's not going to work. So I think the parties need to do more. The PDP needs to do more. The APC needs to do more. The other parties need to do more. It's just unfortunate, that we are just somehow it appears we are stuck with these two main parties. And I wanted to chime in, Rudolph, when you asked the question about Peter Obi, and I agree to an extent with Aisha. I don't think that Peter Obi went to the Labour Party because he really wants to be president. He knows for sure that Labour Party cannot give him the votes. I just think that move was also a political move to make a bold statement, but to also test his relevance. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Article's camp or Article reaches out to him to nominate him as his vice presidential candidate. I think politicians are mathematicians. When they see defeat, they run. Because they want to be relevant and they want to negotiate. They move to a different platform just to demonstrate how valuable they are. And as you can see, he's gaining some level of popularity. So since his exit, he seems to have become a lot more relevant. And so if you're relevant, the relevance is your currency for negotiation in a political space. So I'm sure he's going to use that to either negotiate for a vice presidential nomination subsequently. But we'll keep our fingers crossed. Again, these are just permutations, but I won't rule out a Peter Obi being appointed as a vice presidential candidate.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, Rudolph. Just quickly, before we come to the issue of fresh ideas, possible a third force, and the youth agenda, still on this Jonathan thing, it's going to be a landmine. If it happens, the legal landmine, the political landmine in terms of voters, their dispositions. Perhaps these are some of the unknown. I'm looking at the party itself. Do we have any sense of what could possibly happen to APC if Jonathan becomes a reality? You are smiling. Anybody can.
Well, I mean, to be honest, what will happen? Nothing will happen. APC is not a. We say it flippantly, but it's the truth. APC is not really a party. It's a loose coalition of people who came together to take power away from PDP after PDP had been in power for 16 years. So they're not really a party, and if they fall apart or fall into their cleavages, nothing new has particularly changed. And as I said, from the way Abdullahi emerged, that could have been a rallying point for those within the party who actually had any democratic credentials to complain about. But by allowing him to emerge that way, that's one. I think they've lost any momentum to complain about. How? Two, one argument that people are saying is all the governors, whether it's or ex-governors, if we're looking at Tinubu and how he has dictated who succeeded him, and in every other election since then, have carte blanche over who they pick. Kaduna did it. Udom did it. I mean, between the parties, they do the same thing. Every governor who is leaving, wants to hand over to their own successor. So why shouldn't the president to pick? His arguments would be, you've all picked in your states. I didn't dictate to you. Why can't I dictate who I'm going to hand over to? And at that point in time, where are they going to? If they do announce who is going to be APC's presidential candidate on June 8th, and the deadline is June 9th. What exactly do they want to do? So they will do anti-party. Yeah, it won't be the first time. People do anti-party. It's may the best man or woman win. So I don't really see much that's going to happen, honestly, that's different. And I would say good for them too. If you sleep with dogs, you get fleas. So the people in APC are not democratic. The primaries we've seen so far have not been democratic. So how dare they complain about undemocratic? So if it's an issue about, so that's one aspect. If it's the issue of who, that's i.e. bringing a Jonathan who's not been a member of the party to be a member, again, lots of precedent for people shifting around at the last minute. So it could also be arguable that, it's fine for Jonathan to do that. And if anybody doesn't like it, they can leave. But you can even see some veiled threats or maybe promises from Abdullahi saying, no, they're not going to allow anybody to leave the party. Even if people are not happy, they will find a way of bringing them together. Maybe that will be the compromise. Maybe they will share some positions, ministers ahead of time, VP, you choose this, you choose that. I mean, the kind of coalition and promises that were made to bring Buhari into power, as soon as he came into power, he changed his mind and said he's not doing this, he's not doing that. It could be the same thing here. You make the promises to keep people happy until you get to the finish line. When you get to the finish line, then you betray them. That's Nigerian politics.
All right. Go ahead, Tido. Go ahead.
No, just want if Samson, you have any thoughts on that in terms of the future of APC if Jonathan emerges?
I think there will be resistance. There was resistance at the convention, and it may not have been very pervasive or in public, but I think the president only got the chairman of the party, and all the other positions were left for the governors to determine. There were still contested offices within the National Working Committee of the APC at the convention venue. So somehow there will be some form of resistance, but I think it's not resistance that, and this is the point where I agree with Ayisha, that it might be resistance that would raise, the tempo and the conditions for negotiation. But not conditions not resistance within the party that can lead to an implosion. Again, I won't rule out an implosion, but there are people who have sworn that they would never support a Jonathan candidacy. They might either stay within the party and vote against the party. They might not want to leave because some of them need the protection. They need state protection to continue to control the kind of power, the political power that they have. So they will trade that off. And so they will stay within, but also, engage in anti-party activities. What I would encourage the APC to do, quite frankly, is to nominate a candidate from the southern part of the country. That will enhance and increase the competitive nature of the elections. But there might be an implosion if the chairman of the party does not change his strategy. In the last APC leadership with Adams Oshomole, where Shaibu, who was the national vice chairman Northwest, wrote one or two letters, protesting against the Oshomole's leadership. This time around, you have a Saliu Lukman who is a professional at letter writing. The number of letters he wrote as just DG of the Progressive Forum, highly cerebral and won't take nonsense. I'm sure that if the issues raised in this letter are not addressed, you're going to have issues. Because we even hear that within the APC and the National Secretariat of the party, the members of the National Working Committee are just really inaccessible to the assistant directors who are officers of the party. Recall that they sacked some directors from the party. And so even the staff within the National Secretariat of the party don't have access to members of the National Working Committee. And if members of the National Working Committee don't have access, to the chairman, once the leadership of the party is not united and it's not cohesive, you're going to take them back to that dark spot, which Saliu Lukman referred to. So if the party is not united and is unable to provide that leadership, you're going to have chaos and confusion everywhere. And if the other parties are smart enough, they can leverage on that and seize power from the APC. But then we cannot rule out several factors. And the fact that the National Assembly considered a bill and passed a bill to amend the Electoral Act within the period of primaries, I don't think we should rule out any further amendments to the act to consolidate and secure power for the ruling party, because there are several things that could still change. Because the way they accelerated the process of amending Section 84 is disturbing. And we have a long time before the elections, and don't be surprised if you see the National Assembly rise up to amend the timelines for the elections, because they might want to take it closer as opposed to retaining the 180 days in the current Electoral Act. And I think they'll have Nigerians to battle with if they make any further attempts to amend the Electoral Act now.
All right, let's we're going to get our viewers involved. So in a few minutes, we get them all involved in this conversation. So we'll let them in and they will be able to talk to you directly. But Ayisha, let me come back to you. So the political, let me play a video and then I'll get your reaction, because that's what I'm getting at. This is a video of what happened to the wife of the Ondo State governor when she went to run for office in her home state.
I came to ask the party chairman, are we holding this election or not? And I said, what we witnessed in the past 2 days were kangaroo elections, state assembly. And I thought, okay, the governor can do anything with the state assembly. But national, this is a very important legislative house. You don't joke with it. But lo and behold, yesterday, they asked somebody, all the aspirants, to step down for one, I don't know whether to say unpopular, because he just collected his form maybe 3 days ago.
What is his name now? Who is this person?
Please, I don't know.
Okay.
Other aspirants that be campaigning, spending their money, they forced them to step down, and they did so with anger. You need to see the video of these other aspirants. I said, if this is what Hope is planning for Senate, all of us are responsible Nigerians. You can say upscale Nigerians. You can't do that to me.
You can't do that to me. You cannot. And what is your take, Ayisha?
My take is that what is the koboko used for the first wife will be used on the second wife. That's my take. I mean, I was struck by her saying the governor can do anything he likes with the state.
Exactly.
So again, it just comes down to what our political class, I will never call them the elite because there's nothing enlightened about them. It comes down to how the political class view elections, democracy, politics. If it's not happening to them, it's fine. If they are benefiting from it, it's fine. But the minute it doesn't work in their favor, then there's problems. For me, that sums it up. So there's two classes of politicians, and that's why I liked what Peter Obi said, that I would rather, and yeah, maybe we that think that way are the minority, we're the losers in quotes. But he said something that for me rings true and should ring true and should be the defining model of how we go forward. If indeed, as Samson said, we really want different types of people in politics. He said, I'd rather lose doing the right thing than win doing the wrong thing. So I'm sorry, Betty Akeredolu doesn't have my sympathy. It's as simple as that.
Okay, thank you so much. Samson, let me come back to you because also the Special Assistant to the President on New Media, Bashir Ahmed, also lost an election in Kano, and he complained. He actually released a video today saying that he was rigged out. What's your take on that?
I think it's the same thing. You see, when we condemn electoral fraud, when we condemn attempts by politicians to subvert the process, we do so in our collective interest. Now, these are individuals who have defended election rigging over time. They've defended, political oppression in different forms and different shades. They've endorsed rascality from our political actors. Now that they are victims, they are now crying foul. And so, honestly, for me, I am more concerned about, what this means for our electoral process. And I'm not focused on the individuals, because for the individuals, I think that it is good that they feel what the average young person or contestant felt in 2019 when parties substituted candidates, when governors hijacked forms and made it difficult for other members of the party or aspirants to procure the forms, when they increased the cost of nomination forms and people were screaming that this was exclusionary. And now they are feeling it. If when they were in positions of power, they didn't use that power to protect and sanitize the process, then they should, feel its impact. So for me, honestly, they don't have my sympathy. I'm only worried for what this portends for our electoral process. And we've got to invest in fixing the process, because it can affect anyone any day. And I hope that they learn from this, from these lessons. But in terms of sympathy, quite frankly, they honestly don't have my sympathies as well.
Yeah, let me ask something. Looking at what we know today, where INEC is, what will be your prognosis for the elections in February? You think the electoral body is ready? You think things will go as planned? What are we seeing?
Well, I think I'm an optimist. I think things will go as planned, but there are a lot of issues. One is there's fundamentals that are non-negotiable if you're going to have successful elections. One, the independence of the Electoral Commission is sacrosanct. You cannot negotiate that. And in situations where the ruling class, have made attempts to assault INEC's independence, either by nominating or appointing people who have political leanings into the Electoral Commission, it raises a lot of questions about INEC's independence. And I'm very disturbed that as we speak, there are people who have been confirmed as national commissioners in INEC who are alleged to be members of political parties, and those matters are still unresolved. And if we don't resolve those issues, there's no way the commission can confer or inspire confidence. And when you talk about INEC's independence, it's about its operational independence, about its financial independence. And what I see happening in the long run, if the commission insists to uphold and implement its regulatory or enforce its regulatory powers, they're either going to starve the commission of funds, or the commission is going to be blackmailed, or they are going to cause division within the commission. Because we know that there are people who are sympathetic to some political parties who currently sit in the Electoral Commission and take decisions that affect all political parties and all actors. The second issue is about insecurity. We need to also check the legal and the operational implications of INEC's inability to conduct elections in certain local governments and states. Chido and Rudolph and Aisha, that even as we speak, there are some constituencies that would not have representatives in the National Assembly because primaries were not conducted due to insecurity in those states. There are some states that have over 14 LGAs, as high as 14 to 15 LGAs, that are ravaged with insecurity, and INEC cannot deploy to those states. Not just in the southeast, in the southwest. For instance, in Niger, there are about 14 local governments controlled by bandits that elections cannot hold. Same for Sokoto, same for Zamfara. And so we need to look at, these states and see whether this election is actually going to hold in those places. And if they don't, what's the implication for the different levels of elections? The third critical issue is about electoral technology. The BVAS that INEC has deployed, fantastic device, will help enhance the quality of the process. But I think the efficiency of the BVAS, the security of the BVAS, as well as the transparency of the process is central to the success of the elections. INEC is conducting the Ekiti elections. Tomorrow, 30th of May, INEC will be doing a mock test of the BVAS for Ekiti. Now, this is just one state, right, that has been governorship elections. We have over 176,000 polling stations as of today, and elections will be conducted in those stations. We're going to have to deploy about 176,000 BVAS machines. The procurement of those machines, the testing, as well as the deployment of those machines between now and the elections is critical to the success. And INEC needs to ensure that, one, that this entire process, the procurement process, is transparent, that you don't have same politicians who are responsible for sabotaging electoral process are not the ones who are providing or supplying those machines. That this whole issue about the lack of capacity on the part of its officials to manage the devices are issues that are also guaranteed. And again, I feel like a broken record because these are things that we've talked about for years and years and years. But I think that on the part of citizens, they also have a role to play. And for me, this is where turnout issues and turnout conversations need to be held. And let's look at young people. In 2019, the youth turnout for the elections was less than 30%. In the presidential elections, it was 28%. In the governorship election, it was 29%. Now, young people are about 51% of the registered voters. In the CVR process, which INEC has conducted, 78% of those who've turned up to register are young people between 18 and 35. I think the biggest task for us is how do we get these young people out to vote, in the next elections, mindful of the fact that there are reforms that have been introduced to guarantee, the integrity and the sanctity of their votes. And if you've got 60% of young people out to vote in 2023, then I think Nigeria will be a better place. But not just 60% young people, which translate to 29 million, but it has to be 29 million informed young people who are not voting based on this cleavages of ethnicity and religion, but are voting candidates that have the requisite credentials and capacity, to provide the leadership that we desire.
So one last thing then, talking about the young people and the apathy, would you say that people would need to find something interesting on the ballot that would excite them to want to, come out to vote? Could that be one of the reasons?
So two quick things I would say is, quite frankly, with what you already see, if you're focused on the presidential, you're not going to see anything exciting. If you focus on the presidential elections, expect nothing exciting. And elections are not just about presidential elections. There are legislative elections, the State House of Assembly elections, you have National Assembly elections. So if you look across, you would find something interesting that will inspire you to participate in the process. But I think it has to be framed that, the participating in the next elections it's a battle for the soul of our country, if you permit me to use that phrase. It's about the soul of our country. And if people want a better life post 2023, they've got to come out and elect a leadership that can do better, not what we currently have.
All right. Thank you so much. We have two of our viewers joining us. We give them opportunity to ask questions to either Ayisha or to Samson or to anybody, or make a comment. Ovie, you're joining us from Virginia, if I'm right. Atlanta. Okay. All right. Ovie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Bolaji, welcome to the show. All right, Ovie.
Good morning, Doctor.
Yeah, nice to see you. So, Ovie, what's your question or your comment? Samson, yeah,
I have
currently.
two brief questions.
Okay.
One is to Mr. Itodo and Mrs. Osori. If I'm correct me if pardon my the way I'm trying to pronounce your name. Do you think that the political the party system that we are practicing in Nigeria, do you think whereby only few people we select our president and handed them over for us to elect, do you think is the best way for us as a country? And two, how far can you go to make case for an average Nigerian if he or she, woman abroad, he or she understand kind of democracy that we are actually practicing as a country?
Okay. All right. So any of you can take it, and after that we go to Bolaji. So Ayisha, you can start.
Sure. Thank you, Ovie, for that question. I mean, do I think the party system and the delegate system is the best way forward? I would say in a nutshell, yes. I mean, it's not without imperfections, but it's still at least one way to go. And I will repeat a favorite saying of mine, which is that as much as I'm also for getting out the vote, more people coming out and advocating strongly for more participation, the truth is by election day, because of the way our primaries hold, by the time we're all standing in line trying to, wave our PVCs and tackle faulty beavers, the majority of the battle for decent election has already been lost because we're not in the parties. So I would qualify that. So I say yes, but are me and you in the parties? We need to join parties. I think we definitely need a lot more party members in our parties. APC recently came out and said they had 40 million members. As I said earlier, I'm sure you cannot verify that number. But at the end of the day, I do think a big gap in our politics and elections and our sustainability of a gradually improving democracy is that we're not party members. Parties are desperately in need of me, you, all of us joining the parties, paying our dues, going for meetings, and struggling to be delegates or we don't all have to run for office, but I definitely think there's a room for more of us to join the parties. So I think with even this push of Obi to Labour, people are saying that we might see more people joining the Labour Party. There's definitely an interest after NSAS and the Sorosoke movement. There was also a push then. There was an understanding that policy, the way the government interact with citizens, the ability for us to hold our elected officials accountable is tied to our politics. So let's join the parties and let's fund the parties, and then we can influence things. So at the end of the day, it's very rare to have political processes, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa and other parts of the world where you have direct primaries. Even when a party in Nigeria says they have direct primaries, I'm very skeptical that that's what they do. So what you need is to have trust that your delegates selected democratically and your delegates are people who are thinking beyond themselves and thinking about the collective. So that's my answer. And do we think the average Nigerian understands? I'm actually really taken aback. I also have a favorable sense. I know some people are skeptical that we don't understand the issues. Our appreciation of the politics and nuances is shallow. I would say that I've had very favorable conversations with young people, especially in universities. I was taken aback when I took my book, Love Doesn't Win Elections, to 6 universities across the geopolitical zones in 2018. I had fantastic conversations. I was blown away by how well young students in universities understand our politics and the way it works. The big gap is that we don't see a possibility of how things can be different. We think that the way things are now is the only way they can ever be. We think the way the old guard plays politics is the only way that we can ever play politics. And that's the problem. So when we hail successful politicians, the Wikis of this world, the hard men, the Ayabellos, they are the ones who are ruining the system. But yet, those of us who are coming through, who are trying to join, think that that's the model of politics that we need to follow. And that's not the case. We need to be looking at other models. I'm really happy. Again, I'll keep mentioning Peter Obi until I find other examples of somebody who is, or let's say Shehu Sani, who are saying, no, there has to be another way. I will not play politics this way. There has to be another way. And we need that grouping that we need to swell and expand.
All right, thank you. Samson, I don't know if you had a question from Ovie. If you did, you can answer. If not, we can go to Bolaji.
No, I didn't get the full question, but I think Aisha responded to the question, and I have no additions.
Okay, good. All right, Balaji, what's your question, please?
Um, First, I'll say thank you to the panelists and our guests talking to us since about the political situation in Nigeria. Something that baffles me that I keep thinking about always is that I and stand to be corrected, and that's the reason why I'm bringing this up. I feel like we are actually giving too much credit to some of these people ruling us in Nigeria, and they are very few. And we are underestimating the power of the masses. And that's always come up anytime we always feel like, oh, APC is the only one that can win the election, PDP is the only one that can win the election. Whereas the third force, we always feel like, hey, there's nothing you do, you cannot win it. Do we just want to throw the question to two of you. Do we think this 23 election is too close for any third force to be able to actually bring up a surprise or dislodge these two parties, or do we think it's too close? And is there a possibility of all these people, the splinter group, like and then something, what's the Kwankwaso one, the Labour Party, Take It Back, all of them? Is there a possibility of people coming together to actually like wrestle power from these people, or should we just sit back and say we cannot defeat them and just allow them continue ruling us this way? For how long do you want to continue this?
All right, Aisha, you can start.
Okay, sure. I would just the summary of your question is a third force possible? Is that right, Bolaji? Is a third force possible in Nigeria today?
Yes.
I would say maybe, because again, I'm an eternal optimist. I still think that, and I like the fact that INEC gave these tight timelines, and I really hope they don't change them anymore, because we have enough time. We should know by, let's just say, June 14th, who all the presidential candidates are, who all the gubernatorial candidates are. I think between that time and the elections in February 2023 and March 2023, gives enough people time to mobilize. When they talk about structures and not having structures, what do they mean? They're talking about party agents, they're talking about having people you trust, they're talking about the money to be able to mobilize security and things like that. I think Nigerians can do that. We saw how quickly people raised money for Davido a couple of months ago. When Nigerians care about something, they go all the way. My problem with the sense of a third force is that we always start too late. We should start much earlier. We've known since 2019 that PDP and APC were going to run in 2023. Why didn't the coalitions, why didn't the conversations around third force start then, not now? So that's our problem. A third force is possible, but we never give ourselves enough time to plan.
Thank you. Samson, please.
Well, I agree. A third force is possible. Should we have a third force? The answer is yes. We can't continue to tolerate these two, parties that have held us hostage for years. So we need a new and a third force. And I'll say there have been, there is a third force. And it's just that the third force needs to scale to the point where it can compete money for money, people for people, and resources for resources. And we're not there yet. And it speaks to, when do you build the consensus to become or third force, or what are the constitutive elements, of a third force? One of them is time. Now, you can have a merger can be a third force, but as we speak, there can be no mergers for the 2023 elections because the new Electoral Act provides a timeline of 9 months. So we've ruled out any mergers. There can't be any other new registered political party because the law says 12 months before the date of our elections. So what we will probably see is an alliance of parties. And we've seen that happen in 2019 where, candidates from different political parties or parties endorsed a particular candidate. And they also did that very late when INEC had concluded printing of the ballot papers, where those parties had their logos on the ballot paper. So we will see more of that. But I think yes, an alliance is possible. But quite frankly, for a third force, unless something radical happens between now and December, or between now and the elections, that forces a realignment of interest. Because at the end of the day, it won't be about the individuals. You're going to either have people from the APC, from the PDP, migrate to a particular party or a particular group and want to respond to that urgent issue. We don't know what the issue will be. We don't know what the trigger might be. But if there is a trigger, rest assured there will be an alliance of interest from these different political actors. And what they will be doing is consolidating on what the likes of Jega, the likes of Patu Tommy, the likes of Kingsley Mohalo, and the rest who have been leading the discussions about a third force. And there's nothing stopping another third force from emanating from anywhere. But again, the third force is nothing but just an identity. It goes beyond an identity to concrete actions and challenging, these vestiges of the old order who again want to consolidate and retain power. So that would be sort of my response. And I don't think that we actually underestimate the power of the citizens. I just think that we've not built the critical mass. And whatever we're doing is consolidating and building on that critical mass. But we're going to get there. You need to keep the conversations going. You need to keep the mobilization going. You need the right set of political education that the citizenry will have that will enable them take action at the right time. And if there's one threat that I fear for 2023, is having uninformed voters go to the polls and vote the same way they've always voted. This is the greatest threat for 2023, not for presidential election, but for both legislative and governorship elections.
Thank you so much, Samson. Let's bring in Paul. Paul is joining us from Arizona. Paul, what's your question?
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I want to do a follow-up from what Uvi asked some minutes back. Do you think the primaries, using the direct primaries, don't you think it works better? Because that can be a means. Sorry, my phone fell.
Okay. All right. At least you are not the one that fell. Samson, go ahead if you.
I think direct primary is a very democratic way, an acceptable way of nominating candidates, and I agree with you. But there are certain preconditions that are necessary for for a successful or democratic conduct of those primaries. Now, if you look at the nature of our parties, and if there's one thing that is an affirmation, but we're also learning, is the depth of this poor state of our political parties. That our parties, one, don't have verifiable, accurate membership register. You can't have direct primaries without a register of members. But reforms within this current electoral law is actually going to force the parties to reform their membership recruitment process as well as their database management. There are conversations as we speak, even within INEC, to, by way of guidelines, help the parties with templates for their membership register. If you see the register, the so-called register that the party submitted to INEC, because the law under Section 77 or so provides, they only submitted just the name, handwritten names, address, and probably phone numbers. You cannot verify whether this particular individual who shows up at an election, if that person is a member of the party. So these are changes, and I see these are opportunities for reform. But you need an accurate membership register of parties to run direct primaries. Again, it's very expensive, but if it's not effectively managed, it is still vulnerable, and it's not insulated from manipulation. And I just want to conclude by saying, whether direct, whether indirect, whether consensus, none of these processes is insulated from manipulation. So long as you have a determined predatory political class, they will always want to subvert the process. But direct primaries is the way to go. But I think that there's a lot of reforms that we need if we're going to maximize the utility of direct primaries in our electoral process.
Right. Thank you so much, guys. We're running out of time. We've actually run out of time. But just to quickly ask before 30 seconds, Aisha, and then Samson. We have from June till about January next year for campaigns. What should we expect in this time period?
I would say that we can expect a lot of drama. Our politics is synonymous with a lot of entertainment and dramatics and theatrics, so we can expect a lot of that. I think we can expect that the already actually very impressive call for people to register would have ended by end of June, and then the push will be to get more people to get their PVCs. I think we can expect a lot of more analysis about the candidates. I think that we're going to be more careful about how we vote in 2023. I think there's going to be a lot of public conversations aided by social media. I think we're going to also see a lot of money being spent around. I still think that we might have some surprises. Maybe we might even find that there's a push from non-APC PDP parties. I would say one thing for people who want something to change to look out for is just within this third force. If you see many people from PDP and APC moving there, you should be suspicious that it's not really going to be a third force, but a reorganization of people who are disgruntled by APC and PDP and who will take that behavior and that mindset into a new. So we should be a lot more skeptical. And I think that the conversations will bear that out.
All right. Thank you. Samson, your final word, what to expect?
One is INEC should extend the timeline for the registration of voters. Some voters registered voters have encountered challenges with the voter registration process. So I think that if the commission extends by 3 weeks, it will give voters an opportunity to still register. The second is the insecurity. We are unsure about what will be the fate of Nigerians who live in communities where security has been undermined, and they're dealing with banditry, with insurgency, and all forms of criminality. If those places are not secured, then you're not going to have elections. So we need to spend time to really reflect on the legal and the operational implications of elections not holding in some places across the country. And the third, for me, will be that there's a lot of time, for campaigns. So Nigerians and voters should ask candidates who emerge difficult questions and let them tell us what they want to do. But don't stop at the what. Ask, how are they going to do it? And what are the timelines that they will take those actions? And what should be the consequence in the event they fail on their social contract or to sort of fulfill their campaign promise? But I would say that we need to send word to the National Assembly and the political class that no request for further extension should be tolerated or will be tolerated, and the National Assembly should not engage in any act that seeks to amend, or extend timelines within the electoral act, because the more you continue to tinker with the electoral law, the more you make the process susceptible to capture. And once it is captured, the integrity of the 2023 elections can no longer be guaranteed. And that could be a recipe for political instability as well as disaster for our country. And we don't pray that we get to that point. So the political actors should perform their role and their duty as provided in our Constitution.
Thank you very much, Ayisha, and thank you so much, Samson, and those who joined us in this conversation and viewers around the world. We appreciate your time. We'll do this again. We hope that when we call you, you oblige us. The conversation continues. Please follow us on our social media platforms, 90 Minutes Africa, Dr. Damages, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Bye.